Bishop John Chrysostom's (349-407) sermons against the Jews were an excellent example of this development. One of the most zealous defenders of the new orthodoxy was Saint Jerome, not exactly a household name. Jerome, AD 347-420 to 420, was nonetheless one of the most important Christian scholars, thinkers and writers of the late 4th and early 5th centuries, considered one of the 4 doctors of the Church by the Roman Church. So he was he a church father of the Roman Catholic Church? Considered one of the four doctors of the Church by the Roman Church. He translated the Bible from Hebrew and Greek. Okay, there's a little footnote down here. Notes the Catholic Encyclopedia. Certain ecclesiastical writers have received this title on account of the great advantage that the whole Church has derived from their doctrine. In the Western Church, 4 eminent fathers of the Church attained this honour in the early Middle Ages: Saint Gregory the Great, Saint Ambrose, Saint Augustine and Saint Jerome. So, 4 doctors of the Church, one of these 4 doctors of the Church, Saint Jerome, translated the Bible from Hebrew and Greek into the Latin Vulgate. This translation continues to be the official Latin Bible of the Catholic Church. He also was one of the most important translators of important early Greek Christian writers into Latin, especially the works of Origen. So it probably became a Latinized form of the Greek. We have a wonderfully lively collection of his letters written to his more famous colleague, St. Augustine of Hippo, a fellow doctor of the Roman Church. So he was part of the Roman Church as well, a church father, on the best strategies for defending this new orthodoxy. In one of these letters, he stated, "In our own day, there exists a sect among the Jews throughout all the synagogues of the East, which is called the sect of the Mennai, and is even now condemned by the Pharisees. The adherents to this sect are known commonly as Nazarenes. They believe in Christ the Son of God, born of the Virgin Mary, and they say that he who suffered under Pontius Pilate and rose again is the same as the one in whom we believe. But while they desire to be both Jews and Christians, they are neither the one nor the other." A close look at Jerome's text will explain several of the points that the author has been making. Jerome described a group of people who believed in the Orthodox Nicene Creed. Christ is the Son of God. He was born of a virgin. He was crucified and suffered. He rose. But they thought they were Jews too. They prayed in synagogues, kept the Sabbath, and adhered to dietary and other rules, or kosher and other rules. In fact, they didn't see Christians and Jews as 2 categories at all, but as one complex category. Presumably, they were practicing some sort of Jewish ritual as well, although it is unclear from Jerome's statement precisely what it was. Jerome denied them their claim of being Christian because they claimed to be Jews. He denied them their claim to be Jews because they claimed to be Christians. And he certainly denied them the possibility of being both, because that was an impossibility in Jerome's worldview. For him, and for us as well, these were mutually exclusive possibilities. However, for these Jews who confessed the Nicene Creed, there was no contradiction. Just as today there are Jews who are Hasidic, some of whom believe that the Messiah has come, died, and will be resurrected, and Jews who reject the Hasidic movement entirely, but all are considered Jews. So in antiquity, there were Jews who were believers in Christ and Jews who weren't, but all were Jews. To use another comparison that is evocative, if not entirely exact, it is as if non-Christian Jews and Christian Jews were more like Catholics and Protestants today than like Jews and Christians today, parts of one religious grouping, not always living in harmony or recognizing each other's legitimacy, but still, in a very important sense, apprehensible as one entity. In order to protect the orthodox notion that there is an absolute distinction between Jews and Christians, Jerome had to invent a 3rd category: neither Christians nor Jews. Jerome, backed up by the fiats of Emperor Constantine's Council of Nicaea and the law of the Roman Empire, the code of the Emperor Theodosius, rather imperiously declared that some folks were simply not Christians. Even more surprisingly, he claimed he could decide that they were not Jews either because they didn't fit his definition of Jews. No one before Constantine had the power to declare some folks not Christians or not Jews. Jerome tells us something about the synagogue leadership here as well. They also condemned these people as not Jews, thus applying a similar type of checklist to read people out of a group. But there's more yet. Jerome gives fascinating names to the sect of not Jews, not Christians. He calls them, as we've seen, Menai and Nazarenes. These names, mysterious as they seem at first, are really not mysteries at all. They refer to two terms used in the rabbinic prayer against the sectarians, which is in fact first firmly attested in Jerome's 5th century, although earlier forms of it are known from the 3rd century. In this prayer, repeated in the synagogues, Jews used to say, "And to the minim and to the Notzarim, let there be no hope." The term minim means literally kinds. Jews who don't belong to the group that the rabbis wish to define as kosher are named by them as kinds of Jews, not entirely mainstream. This includes Jews who are not quite halachically, theologically correct, such as followers of Jesus, but still Jews. The second term, Notzarim, Latinized as Nazarenes, is much more specific, referring as it does to Nazareth and thus explicitly to Christians. This is plausibly the very prayer to which Jerome is referring in his letter, since his alleged condemnation by the Pharisees comprises precisely these two names for the group. The word minim seems just to mean sectarians in a general sense, including such as these who follow the Jewish law but confess the Nicene Creed. The word Nazarene would be a specific reference to the Christian character of these Jews. But according to Jerome's report, even this is not a Jewish condemnation of Christians in general, but rather applies to those poor folks who couldn't tell the difference properly and thought that they were both. So would that be something like the Hebrew Israelites, the US Hebrew Israelites, etc., saying we are Jews, but we're also Israelites, but we don't follow the Jewish traditions and customs, etc., etc. We are the original black Jews or black Israelites. Is that what they're saying? In a similar manner, the total delegitimation that Jerome seeks to accomplish of the both Jews and Christians in his letter to Augustine by declaring them nothing, the rabbis whom he calls anachronistically Pharisees seek to accomplish through the medium of a curse against those same Jews and Christians when they come to the synagogue. So what we're saying before, up here, is basically they're saying we are this, yet we are this as well. Okay, we are Hebrew Israelites. Okay, from our view, we see the Hebrews as, according to the original ancient, very old Tab Esrat Brita, or Genesis, translated into the nearest English equivalent by a native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria, Victor N. Alexander. He's had over 20 years' experience translating the original old Tab Esrat or Aramaic Old Testament and the Galilean Aramaic New Testament into the nearest English equivalent. That there is a in the book of Brita, Abraham is told by God to come out of his land, Ur of Chaldea, and go into this other land that he's promised him, right? So there's a whole genealogical list of his peoples, and one of them had a son. It starts from Japheth, who's supposed to be the forefather of the Hebrews, and then it goes down to Arpachshad, who had a son called Eber, and these people then were given this Aramaic name. The R were A-W-E-R, or Hebrews. And then Abraham, being from Ur of Chaldea, obviously a Chaldean, because he was born there, right, merges with them, where they all go, or just his family, end up going to the Canaanite land, the land of the Canaanites, and dwell there, which later on becomes the geographical location where the Israelites, the Jews are today. So yeah, how can you be a Hebrew Israelite when there was a Hebrew first in the Chaldeans, and then later on there came the descendants of Jacob or Israel, these being called the Israelites, ites referring to peoples, so they were the peoples, were the descendants of Israel or Jacob. So what they would have to do is they would have to merge and become one, right? Yeah, they go from Hebrew or Chaldeans to become Israelites. Okay? And then when they went somewhere else, i.e. that geographical location, Canaan, where Israel is today, the state of Israel is today, they would have been called Israelites, not Hebrew Israelites. Yeah. So according to what we found in that genealogical list of Japheth, Apashad, and his descendants, Eber, one of his sons, his descendants, etc. There was people called the Awer or the Hebrew. It doesn't say or define that they spoke this language. They possibly did. We're not saying they did. We're not saying they didn't. Okay, they probably did. Okay, but it hints to us that they were actually a people who made a journey, who made a migration to another geographical location, and that's why they were called the Hebrews, because Awer in the Aramaic means those who made a passage, those who crossed over, meaning they crossed over from one land to another. Possibly they went over a river or something like that, to get there, and that's what it basically means in the Aramaic. The people who made a passage, the people who crossed over. So it's not really referring to a language, but they could, them being Hebrews, they probably spoke this language. Okay, they went into Canaan, and then they picked up on the Canaanite language. Okay, they embraced it, and today's Israeli Hebrew is a revision from the 1900s, and supposedly it traces its origins back to Canaan and the Ugaritic language. Okay, and this is more about Jerome and the rabbis. As we can see, these seemingly innocuous checklists are really tools of power, not simply description. If thunderous Jerome, you believe in the Nicene Creed, get out of the synagogue and you will be a Christian. If you stay in the synagogue and drop your belief in Christian doctrines, then the Pharisees will agree to call you a Jew. Fill in the boxes correctly on the checklist, or you are neither a Christian nor a Jew. The very fact that Jerome said Jerome and the rabbis needed to fight against these minim, these Nazarenes who thought they were both Jews and Christians, suggests that they did, in fact, exist and in sufficient numbers to arouse concern. We need a way of thinking about the varieties of Jewish religious experience, especially in the crucial early period, that successfully accounts for the eddying and swirling of different currents of thought in a larger, more complex field of differences and similarities. One that enables us to speak of both the rabbis and the Notzidim as historically, not normatively, expressions of Judaism. Instead of a checklist for who is a Jew, which inevitably, as we have seen, leads to arbitrary exclusions, we could use the idea of family resemblances in order to recapture the period of religious fluidity that followed Jesus' death. As one literary scholar has noted, members of one family share a variety of similar features: eyes, gait, hair, colour, temperament, but, and this is the crucial point, there need be no one set of features that's shared by all family members. There is perhaps one feature that constitutes all as members of the Judeo-Christian family, namely appealing to the Hebrew scriptures as revelation. Similarly, there was one feature that could be said to be common to all ancient groups that we might want to call anachronistically Christian, namely some form of discipleship to Jesus. Yet this feature hardly captures enough richness and depth to produce a descriptively productive category. For in so many other vitally important ways, groups that followed Jesus and groups that ignored him were similar to each other. To put this point another way, groups that ignored or rejected Jesus may have had some highly salient other features, for instance, belief in the Son of Man, that bound them to Jesus groups and disconnected them from other non-Jesus Jews. On the other hand, some Jesus Jews may have had aspects to their religious lives, following Pharisaic or even rabbinic halakha, that drew them closer to some non-Jesus Jews than to other Jesus people. Moreover, some Jesus groups might have related to Jesus in ways more similar to the ways that other non-Jesus Jewish groups related to other prophets, leaders or messiahs than to the ways that other Jesus groups were relating to Jesus. That is, some Jews in the first century in Palestine might have been expecting a Messiah who would be an incarnation of the divine but rejected Jesus as the one.